The movie begins with Frank Vega, a Vietnam War veteran, quietly riding his usual bus route. Out of nowhere, two skinheads board the bus and begin causing trouble, an encounter that's about to change Frank's life forever. The story flashes back to Frank's early years. He was raised on a modest farm in California, where he spent a simple but content childhood. He appreciated life's little joys and fell deeply in love with his girlfriend, Lindsay, dreaming of marrying her someday. But those plans were abruptly disrupted by the Vietnam War. Frank promised to return quickly, but the war had other plans. His deployment dragged on for 7 grueling years, including a full year as a prisoner of war. During that time, he endured torture and relentless interrogations, but eventually managed to escape. Injured in battle, Frank was eventually sent home to recover. As soon as he left the hospital, he rushed to see Lindsay, only to discover that she had married someone else and started a family. Heartbroken, Frank decided to focus on building a future. He applied to the police academy, hoping his military background would help, but was rejected due to a serious injury. He tried to find work, but without a college degree, he faced constant rejection. Left with few options, Frank started selling hot dogs on the street. Before he knew it, 4 decades had gone by. Back in the present, Frank is riding his usual bus route when 2 skinheads board the vehicle. They begin harassing an elderly passenger, ordering him to change seats. When the old man refuses, the thugs prepare to attack him, but Frank steps in. At first, Frank tries to de-escalate the situation, warning them off and insisting he doesn't want to fight. But the skinheads push their luck, and Frank obliges, effortlessly taking them down. The other passengers cheer, as one of them records the entire incident on their phone. The video quickly goes viral on YouTube, and Frank unexpectedly becomes an internet sensation. People begin calling him Badass. His face appears on murals and t-shirts. The police treat him like a hero, giving him rides home, and reporters scramble for interviews. Frank's mother beams with pride over her son's newfound fame, but the celebration is short-lived. Frank's mother soon passes away, leaving her house and her cherished dog as an inheritance. Now the only person Frank has left is his best friend Klondike, also a fellow war veteran. One day, after helping Frank move into the house, Klondike and Frank spend time reminiscing about their days in the military. With emotion in his voice, Klondike thanks Frank for saving his life during the war. For once, it seems like life might finally be taking a turn for the better. Klondike hands Frank a mysterious flash drive and asks him to keep it in his safe. Frank, unfamiliar with modern technology, agrees without asking questions. Then Klondike leaves and stops at a store to buy cigarettes. A car follows him and pulls up beside him. 2 thugs get out and demand the flash drive. Klondike pretends not to know what they're talking about. When one of them pulls a gun, he fights back, knocking them down, but just as he turns to walk away, one of the attackers pulls the trigger. Klondike is shot and killed. The next morning, Frank is called in to identify his best friend's body. Heartbroken and furious, he pleads with the police to do everything they can to track down Klondike's killers. That night, Frank stops by a convenience store to buy some liquor, but he doesn't have enough cash. He asks the clerk if he can return later to pay the rest, but the man refuses. Just then, a group of thugs burst in, attempting to rob the store. Frank tells them to back off, but one of them pulls a gun on him. Without hesitation, Frank disarms the man and takes down all 3 robbers, then casually walks out with the liquor, free of charge. While watching TV at home, Frank sees a news report about a young white man who was recently murdered, and the suspect was caught within a day. Outraged by the double standard, Frank heads to the police station the next day and demands answers about the lack of progress in Klondike's case. Once again, the officers insist they're working tirelessly, but from what Frank has seen, they're just messing around in the office doing nothing. Realizing he can't rely on the police, Frank decides to investigate the crime scene himself. There he finds 3 pieces of evidence: a spent bullet casing, a chain, and a necklace containing a photo of a woman. Frank then heads to the pawn shop, hoping to learn more about the bullet. The store clerk examines it and explains that this type of casing is only used in specialized firearms, ones typically issued to military or government agents. He doesn't carry them in his store. However, the clerk does recognize the girl in the photo from the necklace. He says she's married to a man named Terrence, a black man who lives just a few blocks away. He then gives Frank directions to Terrence's house. Frank arrives at Terrence's house and is greeted by a tired woman holding a baby. Through their conversation, Frank learns that Terrence hasn't been home in weeks, leaving his wife and 3 children to fend for themselves. Before he leaves, the woman mentions that some friends recently spotted Terrence at a basketball court. Frank heads to the court and asks around about Terrence. The locals aren't cooperative. Instead of helping, they tried to jump him, but Frank quickly takes them down. Their attitude changes fast. With a few bruises and some intimidation, the group points Frank to Renaldo, who might know more. Frank follows their lead to an address where he's met by a strange man in a preacher's suit. Mistaking Frank for a thief, he gets defensive. But after Frank explains himself, the neighbor tells him where Renaldo usually hangs out, at a local bar every morning. That evening, Frank witnesses his neighbors arguing loudly at their doorstep. The man storms off, leaving the woman, Amber, and her son. Frank sees a bruise on Amber's face and invites her in to treat the wound. They spend a quiet evening chatting, and Frank gets a rare moment of peace with the two. The next morning, Frank heads to the bar looking for Renaldo. Some guys downstairs immediately recognize him and make it clear they don't want him there. Once again, Frank has to fight his way through. After handling the goons, he reaches the upper floor where Renaldo is hiding. When Frank brings up Terrence, Renaldo pulls a knife and refuses to talk. But Frank grabs him and dangles his head out the window. He confesses that Terrence has been seeing a woman who works at a massage salon nearby. On his way home, Frank is stopped by his cop friend, Officer Malark, who warns him that word of Frank's recent exploits is spreading fast. In fact, the police chief nearly issued a warrant for his arrest, and Malark only managed to stop it at the last second. Frank, unfazed, tells him he can't just stand by while the police sit on their hands and ignore his best friend's murder. Malark insists vandiculism isn't Frank's job, and warns he won't help him anymore if he keeps this up. But Frank makes it clear he doesn't need his help. When Frank gets home, he finds the place ransacked. Before he can assess the damage, a large man grabs him from behind, demanding a flash drive. Frank pretends not to know what he's talking about, then hurls the intruder out the window. Needing answers, Frank visits his young neighbor Martin and asks him to check the contents of the flash drive Klondike gave him. The files include a town map, building permits, and the list of contacts. Frank doesn't understand how Klondike is connected to all this, but one strange name stands out: Panther. Determined to get more information, Frank visits the massage salon where Renaldo claimed Terrence had been spending time. He books an appointment with Tatiana, who's clearly suspicious about his request. When he mentions Terrence's name, she panics. After her shift, Frank discreetly follows Tatiana to her home. As he tries sneaking in through a window, a nosy neighbor spots him. The man doesn't buy Frank's story about being Tatiana's boyfriend, but everything changes once he recognizes Frank as the badass from the viral video. Instantly respectful, he lets Frank go and even mentioned that Tatiana never locks the back door. Frank slips inside and heads upstairs, only to find Terrence and Tatiana in bed. Terrence panics and tries to shoot, but Frank easily overpowers him and drags him into the kitchen. He forces Terrence's hand into the garbage shredder, demanding answers about Klondike's murder. Screaming in pain, Terrence quickly confesses. He says it wasn't him, it was his partner, Sebastian, and both were just following orders. At first, Terrence refuses to say who gave those orders, but after another round with the shredder, he finally breaks and gives up the name: Panther. He also reveals where Panther is hiding. When Frank returns home, he again hears the couple next door arguing loudly, but this time the husband is more violent than ever. Frank steps in and tells the man to leave Amber alone. When the husband accuses his wife of cheating with Frank, Frank swiftly twists his arm and forces him to leave. Grateful and emotional, Amber hugs Frank and comments that he looks exhausted. She suggests he get some rest and then come over for dinner, especially since her son Martin is going to spend the night at a friend's house. Frank, energized by the invitation, skips the nap and instead gets ready for the evening, dressing in his best suit and picking up flowers. Amber is surprised by his transformation. They enjoy a lovely dinner in her fragrant garden, and Frank is thrilled by the delicious homemade food. Amber admits that how good it feels to cook for someone who truly appreciates it. She opens up, revealing that her husband used to be a different man, but over time he changed into someone unrecognizable. Later, they sit together on the terrace, enjoying heartfelt conversation. Just as the moment finally comes for their first kiss, they're interrupted. Martin's friend got grounded and the sleepover was canceled. Still, neither Frank nor Amber seem disappointed. The three of them end up spending a joyful evening together. At the end of the night, Frank offers for them to stay at his place since their front door is broken. The next day, Frank prepares for what could be the most important mission of his life. First, he visits his officer Malark and hands over the flash drive. Malark confirms that the data on it must be what got Klondike killed. Then Frank heads to church. He kneels before a priest and quietly confesses. He's about to commit a serious sin. That evening, Frank heads to the warehouse that Terrence had pointed him to. At first, the guards refuse to let him in. But then Panther, the ruthless drug lord responsible for Klondike's murder, emerges from the shadows. Frank confronts him, accusing him of murdering his best friend. Panther casually admits it, claiming Klondike had stolen something very valuable. He demands the flash drive, but Frank continues to play dumb. Frustrated, Panther orders his men to tie Frank to an electric chair. But Frank has endured far worse during his time in Vietnam. Torture won't break him. He stays silent. Panther, growing impatient, tells his men to finish the job and storms off, confident that Frank will soon be dead. What Panther doesn't realize is that Frank already has a plan and the box of matches hidden in his pocket. With perfect timing, he ignites the matches and throws them onto a nearby fuel drum, triggering a massive explosion that frees him from his restraints. Frank escapes the burning warehouse just in time and confronts Panther outside. A brutal fight breaks out, and though Panther wounds Frank with a weapon, he manages to flee. Nearby, Panther hijacks a city bus. Frank gives chase in another bus after the driver, recognizing him as the viral badass, hands over the wheel. The pursuit ends when Panther rams into a train and Frank's bus flips. Miraculously, both survive. As Frank limps after him, he's stopped by the same two skinheads looking for revenge. They try to ambush him again, but he quickly takes them down again. Meanwhile, Panther breaks into Frank's house and threatens Amber, who bravely faces him with a knife. But before he can act, Frank arrives and slams him into the wall. Their final fight spills into the street. Panther nearly overpowers Frank until Amber jumps in, giving Frank the chance to finish him off. Neighbors cheer as Frank emerges victorious, and Amber lovingly tells him it's her turn to take care of his wounds. The next day, local news headlines read, "The badass is back." But this time, he didn't just stop thugs. He exposed one of the city's biggest corruption scandals, connecting Mayor Williams to a powerful crime syndicate. For his bravery, Frank is named an honorary police officer, and at long last he finds peace, living happily with Amber and young Martin, surrounded by the quiet appreciation of a community he helped save. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.